listening to Startup Multipliers, where trending startups take center stage.
Today, we're jumping into something that feels like a pretty big shift in software development.
Yeah, we're talking about AI-powered code editors.
Exactly. And not just, slightly better autocomplete, this seems more fundamental, about changing how we actually write and manage code.
Hmm.
And a name that keeps popping up is Cursor. It's an IDE, and its whole mission seems to be about making developers extraordinarily productive, as they put it.
That's the pitch.
So for you listening, if you're trying to get a handle on the really important tech shifts quickly, think of this as, well, your shortcut to understanding what AI in code editors really means and what makes Cursor potentially different.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So first off, what is Cursor fundamentally?
Well, like you said, it bills itself as an AI code editor. The key thing here, I think, is that the AI isn't just bolted on. It seems foundational, built in from the start.
Right.
And the fact that they mention engineers at places like OpenAI and Instacart are using it, well, that does suggest some real industry traction, doesn't it?
Yeah, it lends some weight. So what are the core features that really show this AI-first approach?
They talk about a few key things. One is predicting your next edit. They have this catchy tab, tab, tab phrase.
I saw that quote from Kevin Winnery at OpenAI calling the tab completion magic, high praise.
It is. Suggests coding at the speed of thought, which is ambitious but points to very intelligent completion.
Okay.
Then there's the idea that the editor knows your code base. So you can ask it questions about your own code and apparently use the AI's generated code with just one click.
That sounds useful, instead of copy-pasting from a separate chat window.
Exactly. And maybe the biggest one is editing using natural language.
Ah, yeah. Tell the editor to, say, update a whole class based on a description.
That's the idea. Tasks like refactoring functions or updating classes just by describing the change you want, that could be a huge time saver if it works reliably.
So if we compare it to, say, the standard setup for many people of VS Code, maybe with the GitHub Copilot extension, what's Cursor really offering beyond that?
I think the main difference they're pushing is that core integration. It's not just having AI features. It's designing the entire workflow around the AI to make you productive with it.
Okay.
We're seeing quotes from users who switched from VS Code. Someone called it how Copilot should feel. And Johannes Schickling from Prisma apparently said it's absolutely incredible and there's no going back. Strong words.
Definitely suggests a significant improvement for some people. How easy is it to switch, though? People get very attached to their setups.
That seems to be a focus, too. They
Yeah.
mentioned you can import your extensions, themes, key bindings directly from VS Code. So the aim is a seamless transition.
Okay, that lowers the barrier to entry. What about privacy? Sending code to AI models always raises concerns.
They address that. They have a privacy mode where they state your code is never stored on their servers. And they also mention having SOC2 certification, which is a standard for security and data handling.
Good to know they're thinking about that. And they talk about frontier intelligence. Sounds fancy.
Yeah, it suggests they're using a mix of, cutting-edge large language models, possibly fine-tuned for coding tasks. What's fascinating here is how deeply AI is being integrated, moving beyond simple autocomplete to become a fundamental part of the coding process itself.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. They talk about an agent mode.
Ah, yes, the agent mode and the composer feature within it.
What does that actually do? It sounds almost autonomous.
Well, it's definitely a step beyond just suggesting code. The idea is you give it a high-level request, like their example, generate a user registration page.
Okay, a pretty complex task.
Right. And the agent, using this composer, can apparently figure out the steps needed. It might edit multiple files, maybe create new ones, maybe even run tests to check its work.
Whoa. So it's actually doing the coding across the project.
That's the claim. But, and this is important, they emphasize the user stays in control. You supposedly have to approve each step the agent proposes.
Ah, okay. So it's not just going rogue and rewriting your code base?
Hopefully not. It's presented more as a powerful assistant that can execute complex instructions, but under your supervision.
It does suggest a potential shift, though, doesn't it? Maybe the developer's role becomes less about typing every line and more about guiding these AI agents.
That's definitely the implication, moving towards overseeing and directing rather than purely implementing every detail.
Which is fascinating, but I know what you might be thinking listening to this. Speed is great, automation is cool, but what about the quality? Does this AI-generated code actually work? is it any good?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's a valid concern. Cursor's team seems aware of this. They really emphasize their intelligent code completion. They say it uses models like GPT 4.1, Claude 3.7. Pretty powerful stuff to predict and suggest not just single lines, but whole multi-line code blocks.
Okay.
And they actually make claims about outperforming GitHub Copilot in specific areas like completing React hooks, writing SQL queries, generating test code.
Those are pretty common, sometimes tricky tasks.
Exactly. So performing well there would be significant. A big part of why they claim this higher quality seems to be this project-wide context understanding.
Right, you mentioned that earlier. It doesn't just look at the current file.
That's the pitch. They say it indexes and understands your entire workspace, the relationships between files, the dependencies.
Which sounds way more useful than an AI that only sees a tiny window of code.
Potentially, yes. The idea is it leads to more relevant, contextually accurate suggestions and fewer of those, generic or slightly off recommendations you sometimes get from tools with limited scope.
Gotcha. And does it help prevent errors too, or just generate code?
It seems to do both. They talk about real-time error detection, spotting things like undefined variables as you type, and even suggesting fixes.
Proactive.
Yeah, and they have this AI debug feature they claim can automatically fix a good chunk of common errors. Plus, automatically fixing linting errors, those small style inconsistencies.
That could save a lot of tedious clicks.
Definitely. There was that example from Wes Boss where he mentioned Cursor noticed inconsistent HTML markup he'd written and suggested fixing it to be consistent.
That's quite specific, like having a really pedantic but helpful pair programmer.
Kind of, yeah. It shows a level of understanding beyond just syntax. But, this raises an important question about how developers adapt.
How so?
Well, if the AI is constantly catching and fixing your mistakes, especially common ones, does that impact how you learn? Do you get less practice recognizing those pitfalls yourself?
That's a really interesting point. You might become more productive day to day, but maybe less deeply familiar with why certain things are errors, a potential trade-off.
Exactly. And something to consider as these tools get smarter and more integrated.
Okay, so it seems capable with individual files and spotting errors, but what about really big, complex projects, monorepos with tons of interconnected code? That's often where tools struggle.
That is a huge challenge for AI, just understanding the sheer scale and complexity. And this is where something called the 2025 Model Context Protocol, or MCP, comes into the picture.
MCP. Haven't heard of that one.
It's a proposal, reportedly from Anthropic, the AI company. The basic idea is to create a standard way for AI models to get fed information about a project's structure, its dependencies, how everything fits together.
So like giving the AI a map of the code base.
Exactly. A standardized map. So instead of the AI trying to piece it together just by reading files, it gets this structured overview.
How does Cursor use this?
They say MCP allows them to achieve full workspace context, even in complicated monorepos. They gave an example using Epix, a popular build system. The NX NCP server can apparently feed Cursor a graph showing all the project connections.
Okay, so the AI gets a blueprint. What's the practical benefit?
The claim is significantly better suggestions. Because the AI understands the knock-on effects of a change if you modify this function, it knows which other services across the monorepo might be impacted.
That could prevent a lot of integration headaches. Instant impact analysis, almost.
Potentially, yeah. More precise, more useful suggestions in those complex scenarios.
Yeah.
And NCP apparently goes further. It can integrate external tools and APIs too.
As plugins the AI can use.
That seems to be the concept. The slightly unusual example they gave was controlling smart home devices via Home Assistant from within Cursor.
Okay, that's unexpected. But it illustrates the point, the IDE becoming a hub for AI-driven actions, not just coding.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, MCP could be a crucial step in making AI truly effective in managing and contributing to very large software projects, not just smaller self-contained ones.
It sounds like a foundational piece if AI is going to scale in enterprise development. So bringing it back to the developer trying to use tools, how does Cursor stack up against the competition? We mentioned Copilot. There's also JetBrains with their AI.
Right. It's a busy space. Let's break it down a bit.
Okay. Cursor versus, say, VS Code with GitHub Copilot installed.
The core difference seems to be that AI first versus AI add-on philosophy. Cursor embeds AI more deeply, offering the chat, the multi-file edits, the agent mode things beyond Copilot's typical inline suggestions. And that project-wide indexing we discussed might give it an edge in contextual accuracy.
So potentially deeper integration and better context.
That's the argument they'd make, yes.
What about against the JetBrains IDE's IntelliJ, PyCharm, which now have their own AI assistant? JetBrains is known for really powerful static analysis and refactoring tools.
True, JetBrains has a strong foundation in code intelligence. But again, it's often seen as AI added to a mature IDE versus Cursor being built around AI. JetBrains' static analysis is excellent, but Cursor's approach relies more heavily on the LLMs for deep, project-wide insights.
Any other differences?
Maybe resource usage. JetBrains IDEs, being Java-based, can sometimes be memory-hungry. Cursor might be lighter, although that can vary.
Okay. And one more, the Z editor. It's newer, getting attention for speed and collaboration. How does it compare on the AI front?
Z is definitely interesting. Its focus seems to be extreme performance and built-in collaboration features. It does have an AI assistant, apparently using Claude.
Right.
But based on current information, Cursor seems to offer deeper AI capabilities right now.
Yeah.
Especially that multi-file context understanding, the agent mode, maybe more customization options for the AI. Zed's AI might be more focused on straightforward chat and simpler suggestions at this point.
So what does this all mean in terms of which IDE might be leading the pack in AI integration? Cursor seems to be making a strong case for having the most comprehensive, deeply integrated AI features currently.
It certainly appears to be pushing the envelope furthest in making AI a core, pervasive part of the editing experience, moving beyond just assisting with typing.
Looking bigger picture then, what kind of impact could tools like this have on the whole software development experience, especially thinking about different types of developers?
Well, for junior developers, it could be really significant. Imagine having tools that can summarize unfamiliar code or instantly pull up relevant documentation for a library you're using.
Like an interactive textbook built into your editor.
Kind of, yeah. It could really accelerate learning and make it easier to get up to speed on complex projects or new technologies. Less time stuck, more time learning and contributing.
Makes sense. And for more senior folks.
The promise is freeing them up from the more routine stuff. Writing boilerplate code, fixing simple bugs, maybe generating initial documentation drafts, if the AI can handle more of that reliably.
They can focus on the harder problems. Architecture, complex logic, creative solutions.
That's the ideal, yes. Spending less mental energy on the mundane, more on the high-value creative aspects of software engineering. Those user quotes we mentioned earlier often emphasize the time saved and the improved workflow.
It fits that narrative of augmentation, not replacement.
Exactly. Considering these advancements, it's worth pondering how these AI tools will continue to evolve. They could reshape not just the act of coding, but maybe the very nature of software development as this collaborative, creative process between humans and AI.
So, to wrap things up, it seems clear Cursor IDE is really pushing what's possible with AI integrated directly into coding. From its smart completions and natural language editing right up to these autonomous agents and understanding whole projects, it paints a picture of potentially huge productivity gains.
A different way of working.
And for you, listening, trying to stay ahead of the curve, hopefully this deep dive gave you a solid handle on why this matters and what's happening in this space. It feels like more than just another tool. It could be part of a bigger shift.
Definitely feels that way.
Which leads to maybe a final thought to leave you with. As AI gets woven this tightly into our coding tools, what new skills or ways of thinking might become really essential for developers in the next few years?
That's the big question to mull over.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for listening to Startup Multipliers. Follow now on Spotify or YouTube Music and enable notifications to stay updated with every new episode. See you in the next one.